I am 88 years old, and there are mornings when I wake up and I do not know where I am. I reach for the blanket and feel the warm bed beneath me, and slowly I remember. I am home. I am safe. I am in Ohio. But for just 1 second, I am back there, in the heat and the rain and the jungle. Vietnam, 1968. For many years, every single morning, I woke up in that jungle. I could smell the mud and feel the heavy, wet air on my skin and hear that silence, that particular silence that comes right before everything goes wrong. A soldier knows that silence. You never forget it. I am going to tell you about one specific night in January of 1968, because that night changed everything I thought I understood about life and time and what it means to be in two places at once. Before I tell you about that night, I need to tell you about Eleanor, my wife. We met in the summer of 1959 in a small town outside of Columbus. She was standing outside a drugstore, holding a book and pretending to read it. But I could tell she was not reading. She was watching the street, watching people. The way she looked at the world, like everything in it, was worth paying attention to. I knew right then that she was different. We married in the spring of 1962. I was 25 years old, and Eleanor was 23. We had 5 good years together before the Army called. 5 years of building a life and a home and a future. And then one morning the letter came, and everything changed. I shipped out in late 1967. Eleanor stood at the airport, and she did not cry, not in front of me. She held my face in her hands and looked at me for a long time and said, "Come back to me, James. Just come back." And I carried those words with me every single day I was in Vietnam. Her letters were the only thing that reminded me there was a world outside of that war. She wrote twice a week without fail about the neighbors and the garden and the news on the television. She made the ordinary world feel real to me when nothing around me felt real at all. And by January of 1968, I knew our first child was coming soon. She had told me in her last letter. She said everything was ready. The only thing missing was me. I remember reading that line, sitting in the mud, holding that letter with both hands, trying not to think about how far away I was. Now I need to tell you about the Tet Offensive, because you cannot understand that night without understanding what we were living through. On January 30th, 1968, the North Vietnamese launched a massive surprise attack across more than 100 cities in South Vietnam. It was one of the largest campaigns of the entire war, and it caught us completely off guard. The heat was brutal, and the rain was relentless, and we had not slept or eaten properly in days. You were running on adrenaline and fear and a desperate need to keep the man next to you alive. Our unit was positioned in a dense section of jungle near the outskirts of Hue. The darkness at night in that jungle was complete, and the sounds never stopped. You could hear the rain moving through the canopy above, and underneath all of it, the sound of men trying to stay quiet and still and alive. Miller was one of my men, Private First Class David Miller, from a small town in Wisconsin. He was 20 years old, which seemed impossibly young even then, and I was 31 myself. Miller never complained, not once, no matter how hot it was, or how bad the food was, or how long the march was. He just kept moving and kept his head down and did what needed to be done. In those conditions, a man like that is worth more than gold. It was the night of January 31st, 1968, around 4 in the morning, when I heard it. Not gunfire, something closer, a voice, low and urgent, coming from somewhere to my left. Miller had gone forward alone to check the perimeter, and in the darkness and the rain, he had fallen into a concealed pit, a trap left by the enemy. He was down in the mud with his leg caught underneath him, unable to free himself, unable to call out loud without giving away our position. I did not think, I just moved. I went low through the darkness toward his voice and got down into the mud beside him and worked to free his leg slowly and silently. Because the enemy was close and we both knew it. The mud held him like concrete, and my hands were slipping and the rain was coming down harder. But I kept working, inch by inch, until finally his leg came free. He lay still for a moment beside me in the mud, and then he took a long, slow breath, deliberate and controlled. The breath of a man who was not sure he was going to get to take another one, and I heard it clear as anything in that dark, wet jungle. And I put my hand on his shoulder and said nothing. Nothing needed to be said. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. Mail was irregular during the Tet Offensive, and letters would pile up and arrive all at once. So Eleanor's letter was already weeks old when I opened it. I sat down against a tree and I read. She wrote that our daughter had been born, Catherine Ann. Born on January 31st, 1968, at 4 o'clock in the morning, in a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. She wrote that when Catherine finally arrived, the room went quiet for just a moment, and then our daughter took her first breath and cried. And Eleanor said she had never heard a more beautiful sound in all her life. I read that letter 3 times before I understood what I was reading. January 31st, 4 in the morning, the same night, the exact same hour. At 4 in the morning in Ohio, my daughter breathed for the first time. At 4 in the morning in Vietnam, Miller breathed again. I have never been a particularly religious man, but sitting against that tree holding Eleanor's letter, I felt something I cannot explain, something larger than that war and larger than the jungle and the rain and the fear. 2 breaths, same moment, an ocean apart, one life beginning, and one life deciding to continue. I came home in the spring of 1969 and walked through the door of our house in Ohio on an afternoon in April. Eleanor was standing in the kitchen, holding Catherine, who was 14 months old and had no idea who I was. She looked at me with those big, serious eyes, the way babies look at strangers. I held out my hand, and Catherine grabbed my finger and held on tight. And that was the moment the war ended for me. Not the orders home, not the plane landing. That moment, in that kitchen, with my daughter's hand around my finger. Miller went back to Wisconsin. He married the woman named Ruth and had 3 children and worked at a hardware store for 30 years and coached Little League and lived fully and completely. We stayed in touch until he passed in 2019 at 71 years old. And every January without fail, he would call me and say, "James, you know what night it is?" And I would say, "Yes, David, I know what night it is." Catherine is 57 years old now. She became a nurse and spent her whole career helping people breathe and helping people live. I always thought that was fitting. I have thought about that night for more than 50 years. 2 breaths, same moment, different worlds. And I still do not know what it means. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe it is just the math of a long war and a long life, adding up to something that looks like meaning, but is not. Or maybe the important moments find each other somehow. Reach across the ocean and say, "Pay attention. This matters. This is real." Catherine grew up. Miller came home. Eleanor and I grew old together, and she passed in 2018 after 56 years of marriage. And I still reach for her in the morning sometimes. Old habits, old love. It does not go away just because the person does. But I carry all of them with me. Eleanor and Catherine and Miller, that night in the jungle, that silence in the rain, that one long breath in the wet darkness. Every January, every single year, I am still here and I still remember. And as long as I am here, I will keep remembering. That is all a soldier can do in the end. Remember, and make sure the ones who come after us know what was paid, so they never have to pay it again.